Hi, this is Siegfried Trent. Welcome to my video series, What Do I Think About? Today's topic is, how do you see the development of video games over the years? Well, it's a nice question. I've been alive since 1971, and I've seen quite a lot of development of video games. Not since the very, very beginning, but certainly I was born very early into the video game era, and started playing my first games around the age of 6 or 7, I believe. And I've been gaming ever since. So let's see, what changes have I seen? We'll start with hardware-driven changes. So since the early 1970s, when I first started, up until today, maybe around 2010 or so, video games were often driven by technology changes. So as the memory capabilities of computers grew, games could do more operations in memory. As the display capabilities improved, we went from little green lines or just text up to color and 8-bit graphics, 16-bit graphics, 32-bit graphics, and so on, all up to the 4K video that we have today. Storage of games changed. I remember when CD-ROMs first came out, and this really drastically increased the amount of memory that you could put on a game and the amount of graphics and stuff. We saw our first 3D modeled and rendered games during that era, like Myst, and that was kind of a big deal. But throughout this whole time, technology has continued to increase the ability of games to create vivid experiences with sound and graphics and memory and scope, all these kinds of wonderful things. Processing speed, of course, has been incredibly impactful in what games can do. And also, network capabilities have been incredibly important in creating multiplayer experiences. I remember some of the very first multiplayer games, and you could play them on BBS systems back in the day, and you just take turns. Also, I remember back in a time when we would just mail each other save files in order to play games with each other remotely. So, the ability for multiplayer has come a long way in just about every dimension: sound, graphics, video, immersive experience, controllers, the whole 9 yards. Technology has ever increased and driven the nature of game development and the form factors that you find games in. These days, cell phones, personal cameras, digital devices and that sort of thing are also driving and changing the way games are. So they've always followed the trends of technology. But I think a big difference around 2010 or so used to be like every new generation games came out and they were like, wow, we've never seen graphics like this. We've never heard music like this. But there came a time when music got about as good as music can get in a game, and it was high definition quality. And then a little bit later, now we've got basically retinal displays for graphics, and really they aren't going to look any more high definition than they do already. Maybe we'll get deeper depth of field, that sort of thing. Or maybe, they increase the amount of graphics you can put on a tablet or something versus a PC. But at the pinnacle of graphics these days, pretty much, we've got almost picture-perfect graphic quality in some games. So I don't think that's going to go a lot further. So I do think we've seen a slowdown in the amount that technology is driving game design, and we're moving into an era where it's really more about production capability and imagination. So game design itself, and the design of games, of course, started with some very simple kinds of games, text adventure games, little arcade games like Pong, early role-playing games, R-Bang, I think it was called. So these kind of genres have grown and split and transformed over the years, and we've added so many new genres and kind of interesting ideas. Part of that was driven by technical necessity. I mean, a lot of people had ideas for what a game should be like. It was just a matter of being able to realize it with the technology. In other areas, it's just the creativity of each generation building upon the games that they've played before and getting new ideas and growing like that. And so I don't really think there's any kind of end to the creativity that we're going to see in games, and I think just as there's more and more and more of them, more and more creative outlets appear. So I feel very good on that. AAA games, if you look around, are driven by broad trends. So any given generation, certain types of games are going to be kind of top of the heap, capture most of the imagination, capture most of the attention, and drive most of the most expensive development. These days, action-adventure games and first-person team-based shooters and multiplayer online shooters seem to be kind of the cutting edge. But, in the future, AAA gaming may go in a different direction. Meanwhile, everything else is always still very vibrant. I mean, you can go find communities of people who still program and create text-adventure games. And there are probably as many people playing them as ever did. But the market overall has grown so much, and whatever is the cream of the crop, that's not necessarily the whole gaming business. If you just scratch a little under the surface, I think every year it just gets more and more vibrant. There's more and more games out there, more and more options to play, and more creativity that you can find. One thing that's changed in gaming, certainly since my days, is diversity. When I was younger, it was just kids. It's mostly boys. And as time went on, kind of get this kind of geeky grognard culture going on for gaming. But nowadays, there are as many or more women who play games as men. They play a lot more mobile games, maybe a little bit more casual, but not always. I meet a lot of women who are into what we call hardcore gaming. Diversity of age, people in their 60s and 70s are playing games these days, and young kids are playing games. Pretty much everybody has the opportunity and some kind of a game that's going to appeal to them. Of course, the rise of Facebook partly driven this penetration into a more social market for games, and smartphones, I think, are really the big one that have brought kind of the rest of the people into the fold. There are people who don't consider themselves gamers, but you see them on the bus, and they're playing a little puzzle game on their phone, and they like it, and often leads them to playing other games as well at home. And overall, I think that's led to the kind of the rise of geek culture, at least in the West and in America. Used to be my kind, people into Dungeons and Dragons and stuff were quite the minority, quite socially ostracized to some degree, not entirely, but quite a bit. Nowadays, kind of everybody's into comic books and video games and stuff like that, so it's become mainstream culture, which is really surprising to me, and maybe one of the biggest changes during my life in the whole world of gaming, is how it's gone so mainstream now. And I rather like that, to be honest. Let's see, another interesting thing that's changed a lot over time is how games are sold. Originally, like, games are a retail product. You go into a store, you buy a cartridge, it's got a booklet, it's got a poster, it's got a little code wheel. For a while, you could get all kinds of junk in your game boxes. I suppose they still have the collector's editions, but it's not quite like it used to be, because the game was a little shallow sometimes. They had to pack a lot of materials and books and things to kind of bring it to life. You don't need that anymore. So games have become more and more a digital commodity, right? And with that becomes kind of a lot of freedom in how you can sell them, right? So, we used to go to game stores more often. Now we download games, and I think that's going to continue. So games are going to become a digital, kind of ephemeral commodity, and this idea of going to the store and buying them is just fading ever so much more than it was before, and it will continue to some degree. Never completely gone, but moving in that direction. Subscriptions are starting to rise, and I see games moving to be almost a commodity. There are so many games, old and new, these days, that really there's kind of a limitation on the amount of time we have to play these games. When I was a kid, you could play the games that were available, and you're waiting eagerly for a new game to come out because, well, you need a new game to play. Nowadays, there are more games than you could ever play. Every day, more of them come out. Every week, just a deluge of new games becomes available. So much so that they're starting to give them away free now. On a lot of the gaming services, every week you can download games for free. Sometimes they're older games, sometimes they're brand new games. It's kind of like there's a lot of competition for your attention and your interest. And if giving away games for free and making them available is going to help focus you on something that they might want to buy in the future, then I guess that's good for them, and it works out that way. I think, in a way, there's just kind of an oversupply. But so I think that there's a move towards games becoming a service. You'll see more things like Netflix for games kind of a things, the Xbox Arcade, Microsoft. A lot of people are going into this. A lot of people know it's the future. Exactly when it's going to catch on, I'm not so sure. People like their consoles, they like their hardware. It's kind of part of the fun of the gaming world. But in time, I think games as a service is kind of the way that it's going to develop. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Microtransactions were something a lot of people thought we would find in games, where you pay a penny here, a dime there, for little bonuses or another round, kind of like quarters in the video game machine. That never really came to fruition. The big reason why is the transaction costs on money transactions are usually such that it's kind of a cap around 50 cents or something. So if you do a $1 transaction online, the companies that handle the transactions are going to take like 50 cents of that. So we've tended to push the transactions out of the microtransaction range and into what we call this sort of freemium range, where you get a free game, or kind of that you can play, and then you can add things to it. Sometimes things that are actual benefits in the game, or adventures or things like that, and sometimes they're cosmetic, whatever it happens to be. But this freemium model has really taken off, and it makes a lot of sense, because what it does, it used to be when you go retail and you have a game, it's like $60, right? That's the price point. They have to pick a price point where enough people will buy it that it offsets the cost of making it. So you play that supply and demand curve that we learn in Economics 101 and microeconomics. and you pick a price point. But when you have a freemium thing, basically you can sell anywhere on the demand curve. So people can pay as much as they want, hundreds, thousands of dollars for a game experience, because they can always buy a little bit more into it. Oh, or they can pay nothing and get into it for free, and you just get free advertising and a consumer base that creates excitement and gets more people to want to play. And so this kind of model where you can sell everywhere along the demand curve is really powerful. It's a very different economic model than any other kind of goods. Digital goods, especially games, really kind of link into this. And I think that's the way it's going to transition to a games for service model as well, not just within a given game, but within a spectrum of games that you can put in your library. You're going to want to spend a certain money on your collection, and you don't. It's just a question of what you pick for it, not much, and how you spend, because the upper spending limit is limitless and the lower limit is free. You can just kind of chug along at the low end if you want to. Now, when I was a kid, that was done by piracy, right? If you didn't have money, you just stole the games, basically. I certainly did a fair amount of that when I was a kid. As you get older, you get away from that. But we're getting into an economic model that's just going to support that without piracy and the illegality of it. So I think that's pretty cool. Let's see. As I said, the most precious thing, it seems these days, is the awareness and the scarcity of our time in order to actually play these games. So what's next in the gaming world? I think it's a good summary of how things have changed. What's next? Well, I don't think games are done growing. I think they're getting near kind of a plateau. But they're all over the world now, but I think there's still some penetration to happen out in the wider world. In the Western countries, we're getting pretty close, but there's still a few people that kind of resist gaming culture that I think eventually are going to kind of get on board, and I think more and more people will go kind of deeper into the gaming world, become a little more hardcore and dedicated to gamers, not just casual. So there's still room for growth, but we're getting into a bit of a plateau now, I think. I think marketing efforts are really going to dominate the gaming space and the gaming business. There's no shortage of games. The economies are such that we can make games, and a lot of games lose money, but enough of them make tons and tons of money that more people are always in the hunt. So the real challenge is, because our time and our attention is scarce and the number of games is huge and the marketplace is global, is to try and reach people's attention and get them engaged to want to buy the games. So marketing is just going to be a huge part of the gaming universe for a long time to come. That's where the big business is going to be, and that's what's going to differentiate the games that are big successes from the ones that are small and niche games. Games, I think, will become more and more of a commodity, like I said. So people will make games and they'll be traded to other companies, and then they'll be repackaged, sold off to streaming services to bolster their libraries, or put into packages of games, or like stuff you see with good old games, or I gotta forget, Humble Bundle, where they take the games and they put them out for charity. This kind of thing is going to become more and more common, and the games themselves are going to be treated and kind of traded like commodities in order to get consumer attention. Number 4, I think creativity is kind of limitless. Technology will continue to advance, and that'll create some new kinds of games still in the future, but I think that's slowing down. But I think human creativity and the scope of making interesting games is going to keep on going, especially as we get games where people create user-generated content. I think there's kind of no end to it. We're in a real renaissance of creativity and interest. Finally, one technology, VR, has continued to not quite grab hold, but I think it will in the future. I think game streaming and VR together, kind of a bit of a magic combo. So at some point, part of the problem is you wear this big bulky thing on your head, you got the controllers and all that jazz. I don't really think that's the future of VR, that sort of like immersion tank kind of thing. It's a cool idea, but it costs a lot of money and it requires a lot of personal hardware. But if we can get a set of kind of relatively small, lightweight glasses that we can wear, we can see in pretty good resolution, and we can stream powerfully generated content from the internet down to this pair of glasses and a little controller that's lightweight, then we can have immersive gaming experiences lying in bed, sitting on the couch, on the beach, wherever we happen to be. And I think that kind of VR, not quite so immersive, just sort of like a screen you can wear on your face, essentially, that can get streaming game content and thus can have a really rich library available with very small, lightweight hardware. I think it's kind of a magic combination that will capture, I guess, the sort of the hardcoreness of serious gaming with the casual freedom of being able to game anywhere you go. And I think that's going to be incredibly powerful. We're going to see a little bit of that too, just with tablets and streaming. We've already got some of that. That's going to continue. But the kind of the controller scape, and it sits in your hand in an odd way, to be able to have that hands-free, the visual, and to have that kind of immersive audio and visual, and then just something in your hands that you can do a tactile control with. I think that's kind of going to be the next revolution. But we'll see. You never know. Okay, so that's what I think about gaming and the changes that I've seen over the years I've been alive. Thank you very much for watching today. Really appreciate it. If you want to follow us, that would be great as well. Just hit the subscribe button and hit the little bell if you want notifications for new videos. You can find me gaming over on Twitch as Sig Trent Plays Games. We've got some YouTube videos as well, and on Facebook, and my website, sigtrent.com. So, I guess that's it for tonight. If you have any requests for videos you'd like to see or different topics, please leave them down below. I'll be happy to do them for you. All right, bye-bye.